Picture a royal banquet glowing beneath hundreds of candles. The tables shine with polished gold, rich wine catches the light like dark rubies, and every guest believes they are witnessing the height of power. Noblemen laugh freely, while servants silently replace empty platters with fresh ones. At the center of the hall, magnificent birds appear almost alive. Roasted beasts cover the tables, and every detail is designed to remind everyone present that they are eating from the household of the king. To those seated above, this is more than dinner. It is authority made visible, wealth transformed into food, and privilege displayed with every course. Yet the feast tells only half the story. Leave the warmth of the hall behind, and step through the heavy wooden doors. The music quickly fades. Stone corridors replace polished floors. The smell of perfume disappears beneath smoke, grease, and burning wood, and suddenly you enter the place that truly keeps the kingdom alive. The royal kitchens are not elegant. They are loud, crowded, dangerously hot, and constantly moving. Here, no one admires the finished meal because everyone is struggling simply to create it. Your day begins while nearly everyone else is asleep. Long before sunrise, the fires are already roaring. They were never allowed to die completely because restarting them would waste precious hours. Every corner of the kitchen glows with heat. Massive fireplaces consume endless piles of timber, while iron cauldrons bubble from hooks thick enough to support enormous weight. Everywhere you look, people are already working. This is not an ordinary kitchen. It is one of the largest food-producing operations in Tudor England, stretching across dozens of interconnected rooms. It functions almost like a city hidden beneath the palace. Separate spaces exist for roasting meat, preparing pastries, boiling stews, storing spices, handling fish, baking bread, and protecting expensive supplies. Every room serves one purpose, and every worker knows exactly where they belong. Hundreds of mouths depend on this place every single day. When the royal court is in residence, the kitchens must prepare meals for hundreds of people, sometimes well over 600 at once, and they must do it twice every day. This is not a celebration reserved for special occasions. It is routine. Every meal requires perfect timing, because food cannot simply wait on a shelf. Everything has to move continuously from fire to platter before it begins losing quality. Keeping this operation alive demands unimaginable resources. The fireplaces consume mountains of firewood every year. Wagons arrive loaded with timber, disappearing almost as quickly as they come. But wood is only the beginning. Rivers of meat flow into the palace throughout the seasons. Sheep, pigs, cattle, deer, calves, birds, and fish pass through these kitchens in astonishing numbers. Rare animals appear as well, not because they taste better, but because they remind everyone who sees them that only the king possesses the right to serve such creatures. The kitchen stores everything with military precision. Fresh meat is separated from preserved meat. Fish has its own storage. Dry goods occupy another section entirely. Spices remain locked away because they are worth fortunes. Wine rests in protected cellars where ordinary workers are forbidden even to touch the barrels. Nothing is left to chance because a single mistake could disrupt the entire household. Although the palace above seems ruled by a king, the kitchens possess a hierarchy of their own. At the very top stands the master cook. Few people outside the royal family understand how much authority this man holds. The king trusts him with every meal that reaches the royal table. Beneath him serve experienced officers who supervise different departments, each responsible for keeping dozens of workers under control. Every command flows downward through trained assistants until it reaches those at the bottom. And at the very bottom are children, are barely old enough to be considered workers at all. Boys only 8 or 9 years old spend entire days sitting beside roaring fires, turning enormous roasting spits by hand. Hour after hour, they rotate heavy carcasses without pause, trapped close enough to the flames that their skin burns and their eyebrows disappear beneath constant heat. Their work demands no creativity, only endurance. Childhood here is measured not by games or lessons, but by endless circles in front of open fire. The heat itself becomes another enemy. Standing near 6 enormous fireplaces feels less like working inside a building, and more like surviving inside a furnace. Grease splashes onto flames, sending bursts of fire into the air. Steam pours from boiling pots while smoke settles into every piece of clothing. Leather shoes remain soaked from spilled broth and melted fat. Even breathing becomes exhausting. Historical records reveal just how unbearable these conditions became. Officials eventually complained that many young workers removed their clothing simply because the temperature made proper dress impossible. The concern was not comfort but cleanliness. Authorities worried that bare skin and sweat might contaminate food intended for the king, so regulations ordered workers to remain properly clothed despite the suffocating conditions. That single rule reveals everything. Most magnificent royal courts relied upon people who labored so close to unbearable heat that the government itself had to remind them to keep their clothes on while cooking. Injuries are simply accepted as part of daily life. Hands carry permanent burns, knives leave deep scars. Workers slip across greasy stone floors while transporting enormous pots filled with boiling liquid. A single mistake can leave someone permanently crippled. If a young spit-turner loses consciousness beside the fire, nobody pauses the day's work. Another pair of hands takes his place because the meal cannot be delayed. The guests upstairs never hear these stories. They admire perfectly roasted birds and beautifully arranged platters without imagining the exhaustion hidden behind every bite. To them, the feast appears effortless. Down here, every serving represents hours of dangerous labor performed by people whose names history almost never recorded. This is the invisible engine supporting royal magnificence. Not villains, not filthy caricatures, but disciplined workers pushing themselves beyond human comfort, so that luxury above never falters. Every glowing candle in the banquet hall depends upon sweat gathering inside these kitchens. Every magnificent dish begins here, surrounded not by music or celebration, but by smoke, scars, and relentless work that starts before dawn and refuses to stop. As the morning advances, the rhythm inside the royal kitchens becomes even faster. Every department is working against the same enemy, time. There are no refrigerators, no electric ovens, no modern methods of preservation. Every ingredient has a limited life, and every delay risks wasting food, worth more than many families earn in months. Success depends not on luck but on preparation, discipline, and experience gathered over generations. Walk through the storage rooms, and one thing becomes immediately clear. Meat dominates everything. Large joints of beef hang from heavy wooden beams. Venison from the king's forests waits beside pork, mutton, and veal. Game birds arrive in baskets, while fish from nearby rivers and the coast fill separate rooms designed to stay as cool as possible. Fresh produce certainly exists, but it occupies a surprisingly modest place compared to the mountains of animal protein surrounding it. To modern eyes, the menu feels strangely unbalanced. Today, vegetables are considered essential to a healthy meal. In Tudor England, many wealthy people viewed them very differently. Cabbages, onions, peas, leeks, and root vegetables often appeared on the tables of ordinary families. But among the highest ranks they carried little prestige. Rich meat symbolized prosperity, while simple greens reminded people of hard labor and rural poverty. Status shaped appetite. A nobleman wanted food that announced his position before he even tasted it. The larger the roast, the rarer the animal, and the richer the seasoning, the greater the impression it created. Dining was never just about satisfying hunger. Every course quietly declared where someone stood within society. Medical beliefs of the period reinforced these habits. Physicians believed the human body depended upon a delicate balance of natural humus. Many raw fruits and leafy vegetables were thought to disturb that balance, bringing illness instead of health. Foods that modern nutrition celebrates were often treated with caution, especially among the wealthy. Cooking, boiling, roasting, and heavy seasoning were believed to make many ingredients safer for consumption. Part of this fear was understandable. Without modern transportation, fresh produce often traveled for days before reaching large households. Bruised fruit spoiled quickly. Greens wilted under the summer sun. Eating damaged produce genuinely could make someone ill. Over time, practical concerns blended with medical theory until avoiding fresh vegetables became a sign of both caution and status. Ironically, those with the greatest wealth often enjoyed the least balanced diet. While nobles filled their plates with rich meat at nearly every meal, many ordinary villagers regularly consumed oats, beans, onions, herbs, and seasonal vegetables. They did not choose these foods because they understood modern nutrition. They ate them because they were affordable. Yet by coincidence, their simpler meals frequently contained greater variety than those served inside the palace. The workers preparing royal dinners would never have described it this way, but they witnessed an extraordinary contradiction every day. The richest people in England believed they were eating better than everyone else. In several important ways, they were not. Another question naturally follows. How could enormous quantities of meat remain safe without refrigeration? The popular answer has survived for centuries. Many people still believe medieval and Tudor cooks simply covered spoiled meat with expensive spices, hoping nobody would notice the smell. It is an entertaining story because it paints the past as careless and primitive. Reality was far more practical. Pepper, cloves, cinnamon, ginger, and other imported spices were among the most valuable commodities in Europe. Merchants transported them across continents and oceans before they finally reached England. Their prices reflected that extraordinary journey. Only the wealthiest households could purchase significant amounts. Using such costly ingredients to disguise rotten meat would have been financially absurd. Even more importantly, it would not have worked. Spoiled meat cannot be transformed into fresh meat by adding pepper. Strong seasoning only combines unpleasant flavors instead of removing them. Experienced cooks understood this perfectly. Their reputations depended upon serving food fit for the royal household, not hiding obvious decay beneath expensive ingredients. Their real weapons against spoilage were much simpler. Salt came first. Large quantities of meat were preserved by packing them in salt, drawing moisture away and slowing decay. Smoking provided another powerful method. Entire joints hung above carefully controlled fires, absorbing smoke while gradually drying. Fat itself also became protection. Cooked meat could be sealed beneath thick layers of rendered fat, limiting exposure to air until needed later. Architecture even became part of food preservation. Storage areas were positioned where direct sunlight reached them as little as possible. Thick stone walls helped moderate temperature. Narrow passages encouraged cooler airflow. Workers constantly adjusted supplies according to weather, knowing that a few degrees of difference might extend freshness for valuable ingredients. Every decision mattered. Yet preservation solved only part of the challenge. Distribution revealed something even more remarkable. Not every guest received food of identical quality. The finest cuts never wandered far from the king's private table. Freshly butchered meat, the tenderest joints, and the most carefully prepared dishes belonged to the monarch first. High-ranking nobles received excellent portions as well, though rarely the absolute best. Below them came officers of the household. Below them, lesser officials. Then servants. Finally, those performing the hardest physical labor. Quality quietly declined with every step down the social ladder. The same principle applied almost everywhere else. Fine white bread reached the highest tables first. Lower ranks received darker, coarser loaves made from less refined flour. Wealthy guests drank the freshest wine and strongest ale, while those farther from the center often found thinner beverages waiting in their cups. Even the table itself reflected hierarchy. Many meals were served upon thick slices of stale bread known as trenchers. These absorbed juices and sauces throughout the meal. Once finished, they might be eaten, passed to servants, or distributed as charity depending entirely upon whose table they had served. Nothing escaped the rules of rank. The palace functioned like a carefully organized ladder where privilege flowed steadily downward, becoming smaller at every step. Food carried that message more clearly than words ever could. Every roast, every loaf, every cup quietly reminded each person exactly where they belonged within the kingdom. From the royal table, power could be admired. From the kitchen, it could be measured. Every platter leaving the fires carried more than dinner. It carried the invisible structure of Tudor society itself. Before the first platter reaches the Great Hall, another group of craftsmen is already preparing something that has almost nothing to do with hunger. Their workshop is quieter than the roaring fireplaces, yet no less important. Here, sugar is treated with the same care a jeweler gives to precious stones. Every handful is measured, protected, and accounted for, because this white crystal is among the most expensive ingredients entering the royal household. It has crossed seas, passed through countless merchants, and arrived at the palace carrying a price few ordinary families could imagine paying. Yet once it reaches the king's kitchens, it is rarely used with restraint. Instead of simply sweetening food, confectioners transform sugar into art. They mold it into castles, crowns, mythical beasts, and miniature palaces. Bright colors are painted across delicate surfaces, gold leaf catches the candlelight, and every sculpture is designed to surprise the guests before anyone even thinks about tasting it. Some creations require several days to finish, demanding the patience of artists rather than cooks. The remarkable part is that many of these masterpieces are barely eaten. Their greatest purpose is to communicate wealth. Anyone can serve bread or roasted meat if they possess enough livestock. Only the richest court in the kingdom can afford to place an entire sculpture made from imported sugar at the center of a banquet, simply because it looks magnificent. The dessert becomes another political statement. Every decoration silently reminds visiting ambassadors and noble families that the crown possesses resources beyond ordinary imagination. The same idea shapes many of the exotic animals displayed during royal feasts. Rare birds appear with brilliant feathers arranged to impress the crowd. Usual creatures attract conversation before carving knives ever touch them. Appearance often matters more than flavor because the banquet functions as theater. Guests remember what they witnessed as much as what they consumed. Every entrance of a new course becomes another carefully staged performance, with servants moving in perfect order, while musicians fill the hall with sound. Watching from the kitchens creates a completely different perspective. The workers know exactly how many hours disappeared into each display. They understand which decorations required delicate repairs moments before serving, and which dishes looked extraordinary despite offering only ordinary flavor. While the guests admire effortless perfection, the people below remember every mistake narrowly avoided before the doors opened. That hidden knowledge belongs only to the kitchen. As evening approaches, another enormous task begins almost immediately. The banquet may appear finished once the final course leaves the hall, but for the workers below, the longest hours are often still ahead. Platters return carrying leftovers of every description. Bones, bread, half-finished pies, fruit, and untouched portions arrive together in a steady procession. Every item must be sorted quickly because waste is expensive. Nothing valuable disappears without purpose. Food moves through another invisible hierarchy after the feast ends. Portions untouched by the highest table may be distributed to senior members of the household. Other leftovers continue downward through servants and laborers. Bread that served as plates during the meal can still feed someone before the night is over. Even scraps retain value inside a household where hundreds of mouths require feeding every single day. Beyond the palace walls, another group waits patiently. The poor gather near the gates, hoping that charitable distributions will provide enough food to carry them through another day. What began as a magnificent royal banquet eventually reaches people who never stepped inside the hall. The contrast is striking. Earlier that afternoon, the same roast symbolized royal authority beneath glittering chandeliers. Hours later, its remaining pieces may represent survival for someone standing outside in the cold. One meal travels through an entire social order before finally disappearing. That journey reveals something larger than food itself. Every course reflects the structure of Tudor society. Privilege determines who receives the freshest ingredients, the finest bread, the richest wine, and the greatest variety. Rank influences almost every detail, often without anyone needing to speak about it. A person's place at the table mirrors their place within the kingdom. The kitchen understands this better than anyone. Its workers know exactly where each platter belongs long before the guests arrive. They recognize names, titles, and customs because delivering the wrong dish to the wrong table could create embarrassment far beyond the meal itself. Precision becomes a form of diplomacy. Organization protects reputation. Yet history rarely remembers these people. Kings dominate portraits. Queens fill history books. Famous battles receive endless discussion. The individuals who prepared thousands of meals, managed impossible schedules, and prevented disaster day after day usually remain anonymous. Their success is measured by something unusual. If they perform perfectly, nobody noticed them at all. Perhaps that is the greatest irony of the Tudor kitchens. The more efficient they became, the more invisible they appeared. Modern visitors often imagine royal feasts as endless luxury, forgetting the extraordinary effort hidden beneath every polished plate. Behind each celebration stood logisticians, craftsmen, laborers, apprentices, bakers, butchers, brewers, and cooks whose combined experience allowed an entire royal household to function without interruption. Their tools were simple: sharp knives, heavy iron pots, open fires, salt, smoke. Years of practical knowledge passed from one generation to the next. There were no electric ovens to guarantee consistent temperatures, no refrigeration to preserve ingredients for weeks, no machines to mix dough or rotate heavy spits automatically. Human skill replaced technology. Experience compensated for limitations. Every successful feast demonstrated not only the wealth of the monarchy, but also the remarkable abilities of the people working beyond public view. In many ways, the kitchens represented the kingdom itself. Everyone had a role. Everyone depended upon someone else. From farmers raising livestock to servants carrying finished dishes into the hall, the entire chain had to remain unbroken. A single failure could disrupt hundreds of others. The feast looked effortless precisely because so much effort had already been invested before the first guest sat down. When the final candles burn low and silence slowly returns to the palace, the celebration seems complete. Yet somewhere below, workers are already cleaning the hearths, sharpening blades, counting supplies, and preparing for tomorrow. Because another banquet is always coming. Another dawn will arrive. The fires will be lit again, and once more, an invisible army will transform ordinary ingredients into a spectacle that future generations remember as royal magnificence. Even though its greatest achievement was never the feast itself, it was the discipline, endurance, and quiet expertise of the people who made that feast possible, while asking for nothing more than the chance to do it all again the next day.